Hello everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here for the first time after having been working with Margaret Slebung-Faulkner for maybe 15 years or so. Finally, I'm on a home turf. It's a pity that she's not in that room because she's always happy to pick a good fight with me about almost everything that has to do with philosophy. I'm not going to talk a lot about philosophy today to you, but I can see from the talk about Italy that Germany is indeed a very different place to talk about, especially because we don't have this uniform kind of superculture as you described. I'm sure Italy is much more diverse in reality. Most credit for the transcultural horizon I'm talking within has to do with my work in China. This particular topic, human embryonic stem cell research ethics, has been on my agenda as a kind of German speaker to introduce our strange system to foreign countries for over a decade, and it's really been a very, very interesting teaching situation for myself. I mean, learning situation. Sorry. I'm very surprised and very glad that I have another German compatriot here. I'm sure we'll disagree on almost everything. We didn't stage that. Actually, we just met, so don't think about it. We did not do that. Okay. I will skip all the niceties and just enter the big picture. Where were we when we discussed this topic, human embryonic stem cell debate, in the later 20th century? I think we have to be reminded of where the world standed. We were just, where the world was heading at that time. We were just after the after the Cold War, and we were just entering the first real globalizing developments in the area of life sciences and the bioeconomies. So this challenged things on many, many levels, and we have just heard this morning in the first sessions about some of the most challenging issues on the table, and I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface. So this challenge means that we have to understand all these developments in their social context, and at the same time try to make sense of them in terms of, ethics, provide orientation, provide clear analysis, provide understanding of all the different factors involved, given that we share a kind of thin but very clear normative orientation, that is, for example, doing no harm and respect each other, and these kind of very basic notions. I think everybody agrees to them. Within this framework, there are some basics that I think can guide us through the discussions. One is when we talk about stem cells, this is not just about entities, it's about practice. And as such, as a practice, it must be meaningful. It must be understood not only in terms of the sciences or the law or the economy, but it must be understood in a meaningful way for everybody who is affected by that. The same applies to society. The interests in the commonwealth of society must be taken into account. Health is only one, of course, a very important aspect, but usually it takes a very instrumental kind of approach. Well, and of course we talk about the virtues on the side of the social actors, especially the scientists here, where we take a closer focus of integrity. So do they really speak as scientists here, or do they sometimes use science in an instrumental way to promote their career, and all these benign little transgressions of the code of integrity that we are indulging in, that we have tolerated very long, but which seem to build up to some impact recently. So when we were first facing this question about can we do human embryonic research, there was not really a problem with stem cell research. There was no problem at all in Germany. We did that. There were excellent scientists who did stem cell research, and the only thing that was a problem ethically was the sourcing, the so-called sourcing. And that, is about whether we can use embryos to become the source for our research. So this was actually the problem. And after what we heard about this earlier session, I must really emphasize that this is not a trivial matter. This is exactly where we have a circular figure in our discussions. If we don't accept that embryos can have a special meaning, then we don't understand in any way the entire debate and the concerns in the German debate. So, historically, it was post-1989, and some of you may know that this has been the unification of Germany, and we just celebrated on Sunday. All came down, everybody was happy again. This brought a lot of problems, of course. One was to kind of harmonize the laws regarding abortion. We just had this settled. We had this somehow, after a very painful debate in the society, we had a kind of consensus, and this was in the law now. So we had this shelved somehow, this problem. And also embryo protection was in a way shelved. It was very clear that the embryo needs very special protection when outside the human body. It's a distinct kind of situation. And so this was also shelved in terms of the embryo protection law from 1991. Now, something else happened through the course of globalization. We were exposed to the entire neoliberal ideology plus commercialization and a kind of disorientation about the fundamental coordinates in our societies. This is the globalization after the Cold War. This has a direct impact on the attitude that people take regarding the moral basis, actually. This was put into question. And this also shifted the role and the perception of politicians. And here's a quote from the Frankfurter Allgemeine. Whereas politicians once dealt with research only after the development of applications, in practice this is when they had an idea, when they could know what this actually means, that they are going to regulate on, they are now often forced to consider research itself, like the fate of human embryos in laboratories. End of quote. Now, the basic question here is, are politicians competent and legitimized to engage thus? Can they do that? Can they, understand what's happening in the lab? Can they regulate it effectively? And if yes, how? This was the big challenge in terms of policy making. Now, of course, we had our parliamentary control and advisory groups, and this was called in English the Parliament's Commission on the Law and Ethics of Modern Medicine. But our former Chancellor Gerhard Schröder was not happy with that. So he found it too slow and too biased in terms of social stability. And Schröder was all for neoliberal economy. He wanted to have a fast go, and he believed that bioeconomy would be the kind of way to ensure Germany's place in the sun of the global bioventure opportunity. So he installed in 2001 a new institution that's called the National Ethics Council. At that time, it was highly contested. In my paper, you will find several quotations about that. I'm not going into that. The point is, we have two parallel bodies. One is legitimized, the other was installed by the Chancellor at that time. Now this has been exposed, and through process, it has been legitimized, and now we only have the German Ethics Council and not anymore the parliamentary one. At that time also, bioethics happened. Bioethics conquered an intellectual moral space that had been neglected by the academics in the 1980s and 90s. It was when I was a student, talking about applied ethics was a no-go in philosophy. Well, get your hands dirty with reality. It doesn't work like that. It didn't like that. At that time, medical ethics was in the hands of the doctors mostly, some medical historians and so on. Now, so this intellectual moral space had been neglected and disregarded by the authorities, the churches, civic groups, political discourse. Well, they didn't really fill that gap, and so now bioethics came in. In effect, I think, of course, I'm producing headlines here. It's a bit polemic, but I think I will make the point very clear. First, this trend marginalized the influence of the relevant medical and health professions and the representation of the constituencies. And in this analysis, I'm just following Tom Koch in his book, recent book, Theories of Virtue, where he has a very critical analysis of bioethics from the US perspective. And it accepted the premises of the dominant bioethics dogma. And these premises, from the German perspective at that time, included utilitarian and a kind of Reaganomic ideologies and the alarmistic rhetorics of a triage, with the trifold bias towards positive decision-making, management of scarce resources, and neoliberal claims of post-humanities. I think you have heard these buzzwords. So in the end, after long debate, Germany introduced this bill for embryo protection in the context of import and use of human embryonic stem cells, so-called Stem Cell Act of 2002. I'm not going to read that, I'm just showing you we have that. And it's done in a very German way, especially this part. First it says in paragraph 4, it is forbidden to import and use embryonic stem cells, full stop. Paragraph 2, diverging from clause 1, it is permissible to import and use embryonic stem cells on the basis of conditions, okay? This is how it's organized. And this was, of course, accompanied by a huge storm in the newspapers. And this is a very, very interesting resource for any social scientist, sociologist, or political scientist, or economist who wants to study this particular area in German history, because there you find a real in-depth and pluripartisan debate all over the feuilletons of that time. And I provided again in my paper some of the resources for you. Now, one of these voices, and I think it's somehow representative for a kind of moderate approach in the Süddeutsche Zeitung. According to our constitutional order, these stem cells are the fruit of a forbidden deed. Actually, this term was coined by one of our constitutional judges at that time. There is no way to change this verdict through harsh restriction, however honest the intentions might be. The dealer is no better than the stealer. We also should not overlook the effects of such a compromise. If we may use stem cells that have been derived through killing an embryo elsewhere, why should we not be entitled to produce them here? This would be cheaper, more efficient, and would avoid unreliability. And to add, many of our Chinese colleagues have criticized this law for being double standard, because it's not as bad killing a Chinese baby than a German baby. That was one of the polemics at that time. Well, it's understandable. Of course, it's wrong. It's not a fair assessment, but it's understandable. Now, I think when we talk about the theme of today's panel, and I have to apologize to the host, I think the question, how do ethics and religion shape stem cell research, is really based on a faulty premise. Maybe it holds true for Italy. I'm not so sure, but you gave a very strong argument, I think, for that assumption. But in Germany, it does not hold at all. First of all, to remind ourselves, stem cell research is shaped by researchers with a training in science and hopefully with a sense of responsibility, and not by priests. Law and regulation are specific instruments to operate the structure and orientation of the status quo. And the rules and organizational framework for researchers from societal and policy processes that are designed to include and transform a diversity of standpoints, talking about moral standpoints, interpretations of science, morality, and other relevant factors. Second, there are implicit assumptions in that phrase, how do ethics and religion shape stem cell research. First, there is an accountable power relation between the moral stakeholders in society and scientific research. And second, this relationship can be defined in terms of ethics and or religion. This premise should be clarified within the context of political culture of the country, and I'm just emphasizing that this differs a lot between different countries. Now, the second assumption, that is, that the relationship can be defined in terms of ethics or religion, is untenable in Germany, and the first is flawed. Both fail to recognize the mechanisms or the mechanics of the political process of regulation and the actual learning effect through regulation and public discourse. On the human embryonic stem cell research, moral opinions were divided in Germany over all political and religious camps, and consensus went beyond all that. So we have alliances across the different political and moral and other camps in this question. Okay, I'm told I have to stop. I didn't plan to read all this, but give me 1 minute, sorry. Let me just say my main point. Okay, maybe this final thesis here. The German stem cell regulatory debate was not about moral or religious claims, but about the power to overcome a social culture in science and regulations by an appeal to a reduced scope of responsibility, which was somehow represented by our chancellor at that time, who organized a coup to provide shortcuts. It could have been done in a legitimate way by developing our system to be able to get rid of unnecessary obstacles, but the way this was done rather reminded of a coup. And what happened in the end, I think, is that for this one time, German political culture might have worked out. It steered a course beyond either blunt moralism or hungry science business on the grounds of the Constitution. This is the key word in Germany, the Constitution, as a temporary autopilot. Considering the challenges lying ahead on the scale of humankind, confidence about a sound and robust ethics framework can become an asset. That is a practical imperative if we believe in civil societies. I'm stopping here. Thank you for your attention, and let's talk.